welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to be back here. A couple of things. The mic is new. It does make noise as you're moving around, which is really terrible. So we'll see if I even end up using this audio. And if I look really stiff, it's because I'm absolutely terrified to move and wreck the audio. Alright, the next thing. Hold on, I'm gonna move some stuff around. And honestly, guys, it's like hot as hell in my apartment. I might change shirts real quick. Hold on. Okay, so today I have a little library book haul for you guys. I'm like really excited about it because I've noticed like in the book community there's not a lot of talk about libraries, which really confuses me because like libraries are basically the place where books live. So like I'm confused how you couldn't talk about libraries while talking about books, but I think in the hype of like owning books and like having your own personal library and like all of that stuff, there's like a lot of consumerism tied into that. And as a society, we're really big into capitalism and spending money and having our own things. And so I think that's really why. So I decided to combine the two by talking about library book sales, which I feel like is the literal perfect solution for this, because a lot of the times the reason why libraries get rid of books is literally just because too many people have checked them out. So like, and sometimes the cap for that is very low. It's like 30 people have checked the book out and borrowed it. And so now they're like, oh, well, too many people have taken it. It's probably gross and dirty and grungy. So we'll just put it in the library book sale. Even though for the most part, they're like normally pretty okay. I used to work in a library, by the way. That's why I know so much information about this. But normally the books are totally fine. And guys, my library book sale, they sell hardbacks for $2 and paperbacks for $1. So like it's incredibly cheap. It's a very cheap way to do this, and so I don't know why people don't. So I'm here today to have a little book haul, but also to kind of share with you some little tips and tricks, because it is kind of like secondhand clothes shopping where you have to dig a little bit more because there is some stuff that like isn't necessarily the best in there. I'm not going to say that, there's not. The way that I'm going to do this is by separating all of the books that I got into multiple categories. I'm sure you could hear that breath I just took. Whew, this mic is going to stress me out, y'all. Everybody take a deep breath together. Okay, the way that I'm going to show you guys this is by breaking these books up into different categories and explaining kind of why the categories exist the way they do, and within those categories there's some little tips, some little tricks in there. So I think you guys are going to like it. I'm excited to make it happen, so let's make it happen. The first chapter is called Some Absolute Gems. Did I just call it a chapter? That's like kind of cute. I'm gonna leave it that way. The first chapter is called Some Absolute Gems, and the reason why it's called this is because when you go to these library book sales, if you time them right, you can get some pretty good, pretty solid recent releases. They're popular right now. They're typically like books from authors with like more clout behind them, and so what happens is the library like buys a ton of copies of this book because the book is supposed to be huge, and then so many people check it out, so then they end up putting them in the sales. But you end up kind of getting some pretty popular, pretty like well-known authors, and really find some gems in there. You can really find some gems in there. Okay, so the first book in our haul is Silver Nitrate. Okay, guys, first of all, look at this cover. It's sick, right? It's like got this like weird like early 90s like horror film woman's face on it, but also this like sick ass font that's like shiny, and not just because the library plastic is still on it. Okay, so honestly, even after having read the blurb of this book, I still don't really know what's happening in it. Apparently there's like a film director who's been cursed, and he needs our main character and her best friend to help him film this like missing scene for this movie that cursed him, and then once the scene is filmed, then the curse will be lifted. I think that's kind of what's going on. There's supposedly like cults involved. Somebody is an opera singer, so I think maybe there might be opera music involved. I don't know, I'm not really sure. Basically, I picked it up because I've heard of the author before. I was like, hey, I've heard of her before. The cover's absolutely sick. The blurb, even though it was hella confusing, sounded really interesting. So I was like, let's pick this bad boy up. Let's make that happen, The second book is The Secret Book of Flora Lee, and this is a historical fiction novel that has a dual timeline. The first timeline follows two sisters, Hazel and Flora, who are a part of that, like, remember during World War II when Europe was getting occupied by the Nazis, and so they basically like rounded up a bunch of children from these occupied lands and evacuated them and like put them in new homes while their current home was being occupied by the Nazis. It was like a refugee, like children refugee, like attempt basically just to keep these kids safe and alive. And these two girls have been taken from their homeland and taken from their hometown and moved to a new home with new people, and they're trying to cope with that, and the way that they do is by creating this imaginary world called Whisperwood. The second timeline follows Hazel. Years later, as an adult, she works at this rare bookstore, and she comes across a book that is written about Whisperwood, and she is absolutely convinced that the author is Flora, who we find out went missing at some point during the occupation. That's not a spoiler, that's I think in the blurb. And it's basically just about Hazel deciding to look for Flora, and she like tracks down this author to see if she knows Flora or if something's happening, and so you just follow her trying to figure that out. I'm on a huge historical fiction kick right now. I don't know why, but there's just something so interesting about like reading lives of people a long time ago who lived completely different than you did, and understanding it and relating to those characters that is incredibly satisfying. I always assumed that historical fiction was going to be boring, and there are times where it is, but I think the genre has transformed so much, and people know so much about history, and writers are getting so good that it just feels a little bit like a fantasy novel every once in a while. If you read fantasy and you're like big into it and you're kind of getting tired of it, I suggest trying historical fiction, because if you find the right one, it does really feel a little bit like a fantasy novel. It just like sweeps you up and takes you to a world that you would never otherwise experience. It's really sick, and I'm hoping this bad boy will give me the same sort of feeling, right? Okay, are you ready for the next one? I have some questions for you. Okay, so at some point this book was absolutely massive. Like everybody everywhere wanted to read it because Rebecca Makkai wrote The Great Believers, and that got huge. And then I have heard almost nothing about it since then. Which I think is the reason why it was in this book sale, because it got so big and then everybody wanted it and then nobody talked about it. And so they were like, well, I guess nobody wants it anymore, we'll sell it. And I was like, thanks guys, I want it. So basically this book is about a woman in her 40s who is asked to come back to her boarding school, high school, to teach a class. And while she's there, some repressed trauma around a classmate who was murdered while she was at school in high school sort of starts to come to the surface. So she ends up like really getting invested in this case, and she finds some details about the case that were not originally a part of the first investigation, and it kind of upends this case and like takes her life completely by storm. She gets swept up in it, and then like it just becomes her whole life. And the story really follows her and the case and the guy who was originally put in prison and whether or not he really belongs there, a couple of other suspects, and her own like personal trauma surrounding the case, and her own personal feelings into what really happened. It's supposed to have some class and race commentary written throughout it, and I know that it's going to have some really poignant and insightful looks into what it's like growing up a girl, and how sometimes that alone is dangerous enough in the world. I absolutely love true crime, okay? I'm a big true crime girly, and this book, because it's literary fiction, I think is going to be really different from the sort of true crime that I have been reading so far and that I watch on TV and stuff like that. But I think all of the same vibes are there. So I'm curious to see what it's about. I'm also curious to see why it sort of faded into obscurity and why nobody online is really talking about it. So I picked it up. Okay, the next one is a big one. You guys are going to know this off bat. Next one is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. If you haven't heard of this book, you must be new here. So this book is absolutely massive. Like everybody under the sun knows this book. Other than me, I don't really know that much about it, if I'm going to be honest with you. I know that it follows Sam and Sadie, who are two friends that sort of flit. That's the hell does that even mean? Flutter, maybe that's the word I was thinking of, in and out of each other's lives, all the way from childhood to adulthood. I know that it has to do with video games and video game developing, and I know that it has really good chronic illness representation, which is the reason why I picked it up. I don't think I need to explain why I got this. It was $1 and everybody's losing their mind over it. So, there you go. Okay, so the next one is The Book of Cold Cases. I don't actually know if this book got huge. It was on my radar for pretty much the entire time, which is why it's in this category. Because sometimes while you're at library book sales, you just find a book that you were looking for. And it really does feel like an absolute gem. So this book follows 2 women. The first one is... Sorry, I'm looking for her name. I have to sneeze. Editing me is gonna have a bitch and a half with this video. Okay, so this book is really about 2 women. The first one, her name is Claire Lake, and she was a suspect for 2 murders of 2 different men, where they were shot with the same gun and they each had like a creepy message left behind with the body. She was seen fleeing from the scene of the crime, and so she became kind of a prime suspect in it, but was suddenly released under like eerie circumstances, and she basically just like retreated into her mansion and was like never heard from or seen again, I think. Fast forward to 2017, where our other main character, Shay, has been running a true crime blog, and she's pretty much obsessed with these murders. She just like happens to run into Claire in town, and she asks Claire if she wants to talk about these murders, and she agrees for some reason. So then they start going to Claire's mansion to have these conversations, and turns out the more they dig into the case, the more creepy the mansion gets, and the more sinister stuff starts to like pop up and happen. Really weird, really creepy. I started this book a really long time ago. I started it as an audiobook, and my library asked for my copy back, so I never got to finish it. But I have not stopped thinking about the book since I read it. Like, it will just pop up in my brain every once in a while. Specifically one very terrifying scene that I am simultaneously too scared to read again, and really, really interested in seeing where the rest of this book goes. So despite being terrified and not being a horror girly, if you watched last week's video, you know what that's about. I am going to try and read this book. I think it'll be a good one, and I'm really excited. So, yay. Okay, so the next section is called Good Old Reliable. So this section is pretty much just what the title suggests. These kind of books are always pretty common at library book sales. They're either like massive authors who just like mass produced books, like Matt Haig, Alice Feeney, James Patterson, like some of these authors that just like their life is ghostwriters. Another type of book that you can always find is like genres that are just massive. So like YA contemporary, there's always a lot of YA contemporary just because the genre itself is so huge. Same with like thriller novels or romance novels. Like there's just so many of them out in the world that they're pretty much always going to be a nice selection of these books at the library book sale. And if you're lucky, you might be able to catch some that have a little bit of hype behind them. I know, what can I say? Okay, so the first book is The Summer of Broken Rules. This book has like a teeny bit of hype behind it. Not teeny, I think a decent amount of hype behind it. I've seen it on a couple of other like bookstagrams and like booktubers channels and stuff like that. Basically, our main character is going on this family vacation to the same place that they go every single summer, except for this year is a little bit different because about a year ago, her sister died in a car accident. So her and her family are still grieving, trying to kind of reconnect with friends that they lost touch with, reconnect with family that they lost touch with because they were dealing with this major loss in their family. She's trying to basically just live her life and enjoy this place that she's always loved without feeling guilty because her sister's not there. And it's really just this like gentle, kind of slow exploration of grief. And there's a boy there, obviously, because it's a YA contemporary novel, who kind of helps her deal with her grief, and she helps him, I think, deal with some stuff too. This book just seems super sweet. Like, it just seems super sweet. I've heard pretty much nothing but good things about it, and I'm excited to kind of see how they explore grief in a genre that kind of always dips its toes into things, but never quite gets too deep into it, so I'm pretty excited. Moving right along to the next one, this is Rock, Paper, Scissors? Yeah. Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I couldn't remember which one I showed because I got multiple, but there's no reason to show multiple if they're all the same thing, basically. Honestly, this feels like one of those times where I don't need to explain to you why I got this book. Like, it was $1 or maybe $2. It's a hardback. And Alice Feeney's huge, and I've never read anything by her. Probably mainly because I don't read thrillers and horror novels, but I've heard that Rock, Paper, Scissors is one of her best ones. It's her newest one. And so I was like, look, I'm just going to go for it. The truth is that I really don't know much at all about this book. I'm not even going to try and lie to you. And I read the blurb, and it doesn't sound that interesting. I'm sorry. The only thing about it that sounds interesting is that the main guy has face blindness. Other than that, just a couple in a cabin in the woods. Things seem like they're all perfect and fantastic in their marriage, but turns out there's something darker going on behind closed doors. It sounds like every other domestic thriller. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. So yeah. Moving right along. The next book is The Maidens. This book is completely exactly similar to the last one. Like, it is the exact same thing. I know almost nothing about the book, but the author is massive, and The Silent Patient got huge, which was his last book. I will admit, though, that I did try and start The Silent Patient 2 times and could not get through it. It was fine. It was interesting. It was slow, though, in my personal opinion, and also the main guy seemed kind of like a self-righteous douche. Is that an unpopular opinion? I don't know if it is, but he was really irritating to me, so I could not get through it. So fingers crossed this one is better? I don't know. Apparently it's about a grown woman who is absolutely convinced that her old high school teacher is a murderer. I think her niece now goes to the school that she went to, and like, when our main character was going to school, girls were going missing, and now that her niece is in school, girls are going missing again, and she's absolutely convinced that it's her old teacher. But he's like this white male teacher who's like tenured, been there forever, and so she kind of can't get any deeper into the case. And I think she uses her niece as like a crutch to get in there. Honestly, guys, the last time I heard anyone talk about this book was literally months ago, so all of that could be wrong. I guess we'll see. The next one is All Her Secrets, and this one is about a black lawyer, her name is Elise, who is having this like chill, cute, casual relationship with her white boss. And one day she walks into his office and he is shot dead in the head, and she has no idea what's going on, but instead of calling the police or anything like that, she just turns around and walks away. I guess the catch is that she has like some secrets that she's hiding that have to do with like her family and her past, and why she just like up and moved away from all of that. So basically, because of all of the secrets, she's trying to like distance herself a lot from the situation at hand. But the catch is that she gets promoted to his position. So she kind of can't. She like is inherently entangled in this, and as she gets deeper and deeper into this job, she realizes that the company that she works for is not exactly as wholesome as it might have originally seemed, and the company itself may have something to do with his murder. This book is being turned into like a Netflix show, I think, or something like that, which I'm pretty sure is why it ended up in the library book sale. I think the same thing happened. They're probably buying copies of the cover with the like little Netflix circle in it, because that always makes people check books out. And they probably just got rid of all of their copies of the original cover, and that's why it was in the library book sale, because I don't think this is actually like super hyped or anything like that. But the reason why I'm so curious about this book is because there's been such a surge lately of Black people writing horror novels and thriller novels, like specifically intrinsically about being Black, and like race is a really big part of the story. And I'm very, very curious to see how they're getting that done. I have nothing to base it off of because I've never read a full thriller novel in my life, and I mean, that should tell me that what makes me think I can read these ones. But I really want to support these authors, and I really want to support their dreams, and I really want to support the horror novel. I really want to support genres expanding and allowing people of color to be in their spaces and all of that good fun stuff. So I'm going to read this book and talk about it online. That way it gets some attention. I'm scared though. Very scared. I don't read horror novels. Why are there so many in the list? There's so many. Okay, so the next section is called Nice to Meet Ya. And these are some of my favorite ones, mainly because these are just the books that you find while you're browsing. Like, you weren't expecting them to be there. You kind of have no idea what they're about. You've never heard of them before, but they look good and they sound like they're going to be fantastic. So you pick them up anyway. Typically, the nonfiction section of these book sales is like stacked because, I mean, who's really coming to buy nonfiction, right? And if you can dig, you can really, get past the cookbooks and the obscure pseudoscience and find some like really good topics that sound really, really interesting. And that's why I think some of my favorite books have come from just browsing library book sales. It feels like a treasure hunt sometimes, it can be pretty rewarding. So the first one on this list I'm going to talk about first because it's not like everybody knows it, and it could have gone in the absolute gem section, but I found it at the very, very bottom of a box of books about like, I think, bones and stuff. So like it was a treasure. It's the Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, the man, the myth, the legend. Everybody knows this man, and I was a part of that like really core group of children whose lives were absolutely changed by this man. Like, I read The Fault in Our Stars as soon as it came out. I absolutely sobbed at the movie. I think I saw it opening weekend. I passed senior physics literally just because of Crash Course. So this man really like has my life in a bit of a chokehold. A lot of my core memories involve something to do with John Green. And so I saw it, and I haven't read it yet because honestly it's intimidating. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not a big nonfiction girly, and I'm not a big science girly either. And so I'm a little bit nervous, but it's John Green. Of course, I gotta show up for my guy. He showed up for me, I gotta show up for him. It's a collection of essays about us as humans and like where we exist in the universe and like where we exist in the planet, but like more us as a species and less like us as like humanity. More like, here's the earth and humans are one small part of the earth. Where do we really fit in that? And I'm really excited to kind of see that perspective of us, because I feel like humans are so human-centric that we forget that like we are not the end-all be-all of the world. And so I'm really excited to kind of see how he makes that happen. And I've heard that the essays are so beautiful that some people cried over strawberries. So I'm pretty excited to shed some tears because I definitely will. Okay, so the last two are so obscure that I am just going to read the blurb because I don't know how to describe it otherwise, I think is the best way to explain that. The first one is called The Disordered Cosmos. Okay, so here's the blurb. In The Disordered Cosmos, Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein shares her love for physics, from the standard model of particle physics and what lies beyond it to the physics of melanin and skin, to the latest theories of dark matter, all with a new spin informed by history, politics, and the wisdom of Star Trek. One of fewer than 100 black women to earn a PhD from a Department of Physics, Prescott-Weinstein presents a vision of the universe as vibrant, buoyantly non-traditional, and grounded in black feminist lineages. Prescott-Weinstein urges us to recognize how science, like most fields, is rife with racism, misogyny, and other forms of oppression. She lays out a bold new approach to science and society that begins with the belief that we all have a fundamental right to know and love the night sky. The Disordered Cosmos dreams into existence a world that allows everyone to experience and understand the wonders of the universe. So this just really sounds like the kind of thing that I'm never ever going to know unless I read this book, you know? Like, this is one of those perspectives that's like so niche. She's one of the less than 100 women that have gotten a PhD in a science field, or maybe it's a physics field. Whatever it is, there are less than 100 people who are exactly like her, and that's absolutely crazy, and I will never be one of them, and that's totally fine. But like, that's like one of those moments where you're like, I just have to read it, because if I don't, I'll never know this way of life. Do other people get that? I get that a lot. It just is such a specific existence and a specific perspective, and she'll have thoughts because of her knowledge and understanding and identities and experiences in life that I just will never have, and I'm so interested to see what those are, you know? Does that make sense? Okay, so the next one is another one I've never heard of. This one is called Nepantla, I think is how you pronounce it. I don't know. I'll put the title on the screen so you can see it. I don't know how to pronounce it, and I've never heard of it before, but it's an anthology of queer poets of color. So I think they're all poems. I think there might be an essay or two in here. I'm flipping through and it looks like they're all poems. It's basically just an anthology of queer poets of color, and it sounds sick. Like, that alone sounds sick. But then I looked up the definition of the title, because I was like, I've never heard of this word before, and I feel like it probably means something more. Nepantla or Nepantla. I don't know how. I'm sorry, guys. It's a concept used in Chicano and Latina anthropology, social commentary, criticism, literature, and art. It represents a concept of in-betweenness. Nepantla is a Nahuatl. I sound so uncultured. I'm so sorry. Word which means in the middle of it or middle. So I am biracial, bisexual, and I have an invisible disability. So I spend a lot of my life either existing in spaces that don't exist for me, existing when there is actually no space for me, or carving out my own space to exist, which typically just includes myself. Like, in a lot of spaces, I am either not quite supposed to be there, or just barely fit in, or just barely qualify, whatever all of those things mean. Or I'm creating spaces that I do feel like completely encapsulate me and all the things that I need, and then it's like just me. And so it's like simultaneously like very painful and lonely. And I feel like just the concept, that the fact that this entire anthology is based around this concept of in-betweenness, or in the middle of, or existing in that space that's sort of there but not really, I really think that it's going to heal some traumas that I didn't know that I needed healed from. That part of my life and that in-betweenness and living sort of wherever is available or whatever is presented to me, even though I don't quite fit. I've been doing it for 24 years to the point to where I've sort of just decided that, like, I'm not going to care about it anymore. The truth of the matter is that I exist exactly how I exist, and either you care and you accept it and you make space for me, or you don't, and there's literally nothing that I can do about that. To make you want to create spaces for me any more than you either already have or have not. And so I feel like because of that, I've really ignored and neglected the part of me that needs healed from that. And I feel like this book might do that for me. Maybe. Alright, you guys. That's it from me today. This was a rough video to film. Hopefully it didn't come across that way on camera, and editing Madison can make this look a little less hectic than it really is. But I'm really glad that you guys decided to spend some time with me, that you let me ramble on forever and ever about books. And I hope that you learned some things about library book sales. They're really, guys, it's really a gold mine. I'm telling you, you should enjoy it. Like, go. They're great. I love them. We all know where this is going, guys. If you could drop me a like, a comment, maybe even a cheeky little subscribe. That would be absolutely fantastic. I'm just now getting my channel up off the ground, and I feel like this time might be the time for me, you know? So if you want to help me out, if you want to support me on that journey, I would be forever and endlessly grateful for that. Alright guys, I will see you in the next one. Bye. I have kissed at the end of both of my videos, and I can't decide whether or not that's like something that I want to do, because it's probably really weird and gross, but for some reason it's always my natural instinct to do. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe I can make it not weird. Bye. 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 So weird, right? See you later.